Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. We are very happy to start another day of ELF Week, this event that is going to help us bridge the gap between what happens in the academia and teaching practice. And today we have two very special women, actually. And right now we're going to have Priscila Bordon, and she's also a BrELT moderator. She is the person behind ELF Week. So Priscilla, thank you and congratulations. The event has been amazing so far, and I'm sure we're going to have an amazing week. So before Priscilla starts, let me read her bio real quick. Priscilla is a public school teacher from Pindamonhangaba, São Paulo. She holds a BA in Languages and Literature and is currently seeking a master's degree in Global Englishes in the University of Southampton. She is a former Fulbright Scholar and a Chevening Scholar for the 2017-2018 academic year. As I said before, she's one of the BrELT moderators and organizer of the BrELT ELF Week. So without further ado, the amazing Priscilla.
Thank you, Thiago. And thank you, Andrea, for being here, helping us conduct this webinar. Thank you so much. And I also want to thank BrELT for the chance of holding this event, because I have been studying about ELF and global Englishes here, and I really wanted to share this with all the teachers in Brazil. So it's very, very important for me, this event, and I hope I'm helping somehow. Okay, so let's start. Let me share my screen first.
Of that first. So, okay, so Priscilla is going to share her screen. So, okay, we can see that.
You can see that. So I'm going to talk about English as a Lingua Franca and the Base Nacional Comum Curricular, which is the new educational policy that is going to be implemented soon in Brazil. And they mention English as a lingua franca. So I really wanted to talk, since we are doing an ELF Week, I wanted to talk about how is English seen in this new policy. So first, I want to introduce myself. As Thiago read the bio, but I just wanted to talk a little more about what I'm doing here and studying here in Southampton. So as said before, I'm a public school teacher, and I'm here in Southampton trying to find a way to help teachers empower themselves and empower their students through English. And how, at my way, the way I thought that would help teachers is going through English as a lingua franca rather than English as a foreign language. So I'm doing a dissertation about teachers' perceptions and about English as a lingua franca and their beliefs of what they know or what they don't know, and why they don't know English as a lingua franca and why they should know it. And also I'm a BrELT moderator, which has helped me a lot in my own practice in the classroom to improve myself as a researcher, as a teacher, and it has been great to be one of the moderators and also a member of BrELT. So the overview of the talk, I know that Jennifer Jenkins already gave us a definition of ELF, but I'm going through it again really quick. I'm going to talk about English as a lingua franca in English language teaching. Also, I'm going to talk about teachers' beliefs in relation to ELF. I did a quick research. I don't know who is part of BrELT and has participated of this research. You're going to know what happened to that questions I asked you. So I made a piece of research in relation to that data that I collected from you. I'm going to talk about ELF awareness, then English in the Base Nacional Comum Curricular, the competencies that is expected from what is English, what are the competencies in the BNCC, an example of ELF-aware activity, and then I'm going to open for questions. Okay, so really quick, just going through this really quick. The key concepts for English as a lingua franca. ELF, the most important thing is that ELF is not a thing, it's a way. So it's not something monolithic that you can see and it's observable from one point of view. So it's a phenomenon, it's a way of using English, and everyone has its own ownership. It owns the language in a different way. And English as a lingua franca, English as a lingua franca is often used for intercultural communication. So it's very important to notice how the native speaker and the native norms, they don't really have much room in ELF, because most of the communication in ELF is among people from different cultures and different languages, different first languages. What is very important also is that ELF is not a variety of English. It's not one variety. As I said, it's not monolithic. It's not like Brazilian English, that's ELF. Brazilians speaking English can be ELF, English used as a lingua franca, English being as a lingua franca, but it's not one variety. And English as a lingua franca is not the same phenomenon as English as a native language. So those are two different phenomena. English as a native language and the norms from English as a native language and as natives use them is not seen as relevant in English as a lingua franca. So English spoken by non-native speakers should not be expected to be acquired from a monolingual native English speaker perspective. Because the first languages, they make part of a repertoire of people speaking English, and English is another language in this repertoire. So it's to expect people to speak like a native is unreal. It's not something to be expected from our students. So I'm going to talk really quick. I've talked about the concepts first, because another thing that I can't forget is that, I'm sorry, going back really quick. English as a lingua franca is not also, it doesn't mean everything go as well. It's not everything go. Jenkins mentioned yesterday in her webinar that we are not saying that you shouldn't be teaching English and just let everything go. There is a core, she wrote the lingua franca core of what is expected for speech to be intelligible. So it's not everything go. So you shouldn't say that English as a lingua franca is, you can speak English the way you want without expecting any intelligibility. Intelligibility is very important for English as a lingua franca. So I made this really quick research with 15 participants. They are all Brazilian public school teachers. And I had 5 questions about global Englishes and ELF in general. Was a questionnaire, open-ended questionnaire. And I wanted to understand some ideologies, like standard English ideology and English as a lingua franca as well. So the questions I asked are those. Why do you think we should learn and teach English? How would you define your English? Do you agree or disagree with this statement? English as a lingua franca users do not need to adhere to native speaker norms, but use ELF to meet their communicative needs. So I asked if teachers agreed with this statement and why they agree or disagree. Which do you think is the best way to learn or teach English? Is there a better English to be taught? And if so, which one and why? So some things I found out is that teachers, they acknowledge the importance of global Englishes and English as a lingua franca in a superficial level. But 12 participants recognized that English should be taught, learned, should be the one that promoted international communication. Okay, they are still acknowledging global English as an English as a lingua franca, because that's what the real English is, the English used for intercultural communication. And they use terms like English as a lingua franca, English for international communication. However, in a deeper level, when asked if they agree that ELF users do not need to adhere to native speaker norms, almost half of participants clearly disagreed with the statements. At the same time, participants who apparently agreed seem to have mixed feelings about ELF. Now, some reactions are like these ones. The tests are linked to opportunities, and native English linked to opportunity, or ELF being used in a low level, so kind of saying that English as a lingua franca can accept everything, everything goes, and also that using ELF or using English without having like without doing any effort is a way of disrespecting cultures and languages, and that ELF is not refined, is not something worthy of like being used in communication. So those ideologies show that there are a lot of misunderstandings about what ELF is. And this piece of research was one of the things that made me go forward with the idea of the BrELT ELF Week. So why English as a lingua franca in English language teaching? Why is that relevant for English language teaching, since English as a lingua franca is a phenomenon, a natural phenomenon? And why should we tackle this issue, this phenomena in English language teaching? So ELF raises implications for the English language teaching classroom in the sense that learners can benefit from developing into confident and efficient non-native users of English. So here I'm trying to quote as many researchers I could. I'm trying to quote as many as I can because I want to show research, but make it accessible for teachers. So I'll explain every quote. And also because I want to make it available for teachers, that research can help you grow. So these slides are going to be available for any teachers who want it, okay? So Sifakis is one of, he's a specialist, Jenkins mentioned him in ELF in ELT. And here you can say that ELF raises implications for our English language teaching because it benefits in confidence and efficiency when non-native users of English are using English in their own terms. So it's a way of empowering our students because we are raising their confidence in showing them that the English they speak is also legitimate. It's they can use it as you can be confident about it. They don't need to mime a native speaker. However, for teachers, the resistance to change is a characteristic that is met across professional contexts, not only the teaching profession, and may be due to a variety of reasons that have to do with a failure to recognize the need for change. So sometimes seeing ELF as something, for example, it's a low level of English, I don't want to teach that, although you can't teach ELF, but I don't want to teach a low level of English to my students. So that's actually a misunderstanding of ELF, and the need to change this understanding is the fear of the unknown. Like when you have to change something, it's also related to it's also related to a threat to expertise or existing power relations. So because we've learned so many things that they are the way they are, that they shouldn't change, this fear of changing is also something that can drag us behind in what is natural, which is ELF. English as a lingua franca is the natural thing to happen in English, English being used in communication. So this is what lies at the core of the ELF-aware perspective. So in ELF awareness, ELF is a problem. It's seen as a problem because every phenomenon is variable, is not stable. And what is not stable, it can be a problem. But problems help us grow. And the concept of ELF awareness can help ELT stakeholders use ELF as a springboard for personal and professional growth, and for getting to grips with the postmodern challenges of global communication. So understanding ELF is part of growing professionally for teachers. So the ELF awareness perspective to language teaching, that's what we can do with ELF in the classroom, is becoming ELF aware and critical about how English is used in global communication today. So again, most speakers of English and English teachers are non-native speakers. English language teaching usually takes the English as a foreign language approach to language, which focus on native speakers' norms and forms. So that's the opposite of ELF. ELF doesn't take the native speaker as a model. The model is the teacher that is teaching, which is not a non-native speaker. It's not a native speaker, actually. It's a non-native English teacher. So he or she should be the norm, should be the model, should be the one to provide the models for students to follow. In English as a foreign language, the goal is native English with RP or GA, General American Accents for learners, which is not a reasonable goal if we consider that English as a lingua franca users are exploiting any potential use of English for their own communication, which is what is expected in any natural development of languages. Okay. The problem is not the teaching of standard forms. So that's not a problem. The lack of acknowledgement that the rules have changed is the problem. English teaching should not be based only on one variety or any idealized native form, but in successful communication in which language users can negotiate meanings and accommodate to their interlocutors. So our students, I'm taking my students in my classroom as an example. They are in inner cities, they are underprivileged, they don't have access to a lot of what language schools can offer to their students. So in public schools, the game is different. It's very different how you teach English. So for them, sometimes taking a song they like, which speaks to them, from a Brazilian speaking English, one of the songs that they like that speak some English, that's they are having some access to English. They're having some connection with it, and maybe taking that and showing them what is Brazilian English and how they can connect with it may open doors and may empower them. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't teach in quotes correct standard English. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't think that ELF is just let's take everything goes. It's not like that. Teachers, however, seem to be moving away faster from native speaker norms compared to students' expectations for native-like English. So teachers are acknowledging it faster than students. Students are really still they still want to sound like a native because there are a series of ideologies around what English is for these students and why the whys and hows they want to learn English. And the whys are very important. We should understand why they're learning English and why they want to sound like a native. they have their reasons, and acknowledging that English is as a lingua franca is a natural phenomenon, and they are gonna speak English with other people rather than only natives, is also something to be acknowledged to these students in a way to make them aware. Matsumoto argues that it's necessary to present students with a wide range of variations in English usage, such as successful ELF interactions, for the sake of familiarizing them with various Englishes and raising English learners' awareness of the global roles of English. So, our role as a teacher, mainly as a public school teacher, talking about my context. So our role as a teacher is to show how English is really used, not an idealized way of using English. They should understand that the teacher is the model, is a model for them, can be a model for them, and any other one, any other person close to them can be a model of how English is spoken. So ELF, as I mentioned before, is not a thing, so it can be taught. We can't teach ELF, okay? So the process of engaging with ELF research and developing one's own understanding of the ways in which it can be integrated in one's classroom context through a continuous process of critical reflection, design, implementation, and evaluation of instructional activities that reflect and localize one's interpretation of the ELF construct. So, for teachers to engage with ELF research is a step. So, it's being critical and understanding that ELF has something to add in the classroom. So it gets critical reflection. We need critical reflection of how English and what ELF is. So one do not teach ELF, as I mentioned, but a teacher is ELF aware or leads an ELF aware class, okay, or ELF friendly classes, as Ifak mentioned. Engaging with ELF in the classroom demands a certain level of autonomy from the teacher, both in looking for the literature to inform oneself and to apply ELF-friendly practice in the classroom. So, the BNCC actually mentions the autonomy of the teacher, how the teacher has some autonomy in choosing which kind of content or abilities or competences he or she wants to use in each year. They give you a suggestion, but you can change if you want the order of the competences they are modeling for you. So engaging with ELF, understanding ELF, and trying to put into practice is very localized. It's something the teacher has to measure if it's really something relevant for he or she his or her classroom. It needs to be understood. Need to understand what ELF is, to see how it fits in your reality, how it fits in your context, if it fits at all. So it's localized. English as a lingua franca is global, but how you tackle it in the classroom, it's local. So, findings from the extensive studies of what ELF users know and how they interact should inform lesson plans. So the interactions of ELF users should be in the classroom to inform the classroom. Should inform teacher training curricula, textbooks, policies, assessment procedures in ways that will render the ELT experience richer and deeper. So, and closer to a realistic experience of what has come to be global communication via English. So, for example, what happened to me here in the UK study my master's, not even 1%. I had only 2 classmates that were English. The vast majority were Chinese, Mexicans, Thai, and many other nationalities. And my communication was with them. So there was really no point of trying to stick to the rules of native English. So what was happening, sometimes I saw myself trying to understand the saying that a Chinese classmate of mine was translating. So we're trying to accommodate and negotiate with each other. So those are abilities and the competences that we should be tackling in the classroom, trying to make our students aware that they should accommodate and negotiate rather than know how to pronounce the TH, for example, which is something that Jenkins has already proven that doesn't affect intelligibility. Should we be then spending time with certain sounds in pronunciation that doesn't affect intelligibility, rather than teaching how to accommodate, negotiate, and etc. So another way of tackling alpha-awareness, of trying to make classes alpha-aware, is obviously focusing on teachers' alpha-awareness and teacher education, which is something one of our speakers, a Saturday speaker, Thelma Jimenez, her research is guiding me through my master's. So, and she has a very important and really interesting article about how alpha awareness can be developed in teacher education. Alpha researchers understand that it's a complex field to engage with. There is an overwhelming amount of papers and discussions in the field. So alpha researchers, they know that there's a lot to be read by teachers to understand ELF. It's a very complex phenomenon to understand. But however, the first step for a transformative perspective in English language teaching has to come from the teacher. So no one can just say you should do that. It has to be something from personal growth. It's a problem that you see and you want to put in your classroom and change and transform your student and your student's reality. So, as well as the willingness to engage with this new paradigm for a change in their practice. So, once a teacher engage with ELF and understand ELF, or sometimes a teacher doesn't even know the name ELF or English as a lingua franca, and it's already engaging with it, understanding how it is. You don't need to know the name to engage with it, but understanding and having and engaging with the theory help you have a background that supports your practice. So engaging with research will support your practice. Engaging with not heavy, like hard research and difficult articles, but there are many researchers and teacher trainers that engage with ELF. Like one of our, we have another speaker, Marek. He is engaging with ELF and training teachers in a very accessible way. So we should be engaging with it step by step. Teachers should be engaging with it step by step, but it has to come from an autonomy from the teacher. So I think that many people has already, many teachers have already read the Base Nacional Comum Curricular. So it supports ideas such as the construction of multilingual, multicultural repertoires, interculturality, for the acknowledgement and respect of differences, in questioning of the standard English ideology, and presents the idea of English as a lingua franca. So this is a translation from the BNCC, okay? Teaching English with this aim of English as a lingua franca has for the curriculum 2 important implications. The first is that it's mandatory to revise the relations among language, territory, and culture. because the speakers of English are not found only in countries where it has an official character. So we shouldn't be focusing only in the US, UK, Australia, and South Africa, like only these four countries. We shouldn't be focusing on specific countries because ELF is not related to territory. It's not like how it's not like because you are in this country, communicate with a person of another country. This is not really important enough because we also take the look at the person's identity and how that person owns the language for him or herself. So it is a matter then of defining the option of teaching English as a lingua franca, a language of international communication used by speakers spread throughout the world with different linguistic and cultural repertoires. This perspective allows questioning of the idea of unique correct English, and in traditional teaching, it is the way of spoken by North Americans and the British, for example. So there is no correct English. As we've heard many times, if we engage with Paulo Freire, for example, there's no one correct way of speaking. We should acknowledge all the ways our students communicate and use their language, and that should be valued as well. So here I have some examples. So I separated by let me see, the 4 grades, from 6th to the 9th grades. I took just some examples and what would be considered opposite. That is linguistic knowledge, which is like grammar and spelling or anything like that, but mostly grammar, and intercultural dimension. So that's some might say that it's easier to engage with ELF in the intercultural dimension part of the BNCC. But it's also we can also see that we can also be ELF aware when teaching grammar. So they say here, empregar de forma inteligível. Students are expected to use the possessive adjectives in an intelligible way. So in a correct way, in an intelligible way. And people from many different countries can use it differently. I don't know. I would have to do some research on it. As a teacher, I would have to look it up and see how it works in other Englishes. That's why ELF is a problem, because we need to look it up. We need to leave behind what is settled. We need to engage with the different. So the intercultural dimension of BNCC wants to question a lot of the relations to language and territory. So here I have two competences, two abilities that they want to tackle, that is related to the comparison with the mother tongue, with different English being considered a mother tongue in different countries, or having an official being an official language in different countries. So that's for the 6th grade, which is how students are being introduced to English in many schools, mostly in public schools, but many regular schools, English is being introduced to the students. So start by showing them that English is all around us. So we have to identify also the presence of English in the Brazilian society, in our community, so it's localized. That's also an aspect of ELF. For the 7th grade, again, we see use in an intelligible way, not in a correct way or in a standard way, in an intelligible way, how to use can. So again, that's self-aware. It's English as a lingua franca. Intelligibility is very important, and it's the main goal actually. And the intercultural dimensions we are discussing with seventh grade. We are exploring seventh grade prejudice or acknowledging linguistic variation and how languages they follow a natural phenomenon, natural flow. So those are aspects that we alpha-aware teachers would bring to the classroom more easily if they are alpha-aware, if they know what ELF is. Again, and it goes and actually it gets bigger and bigger. They have more of like, intelligible way, use in an intelligible way. This is grammar. You're using grammar in an intelligible way, not in a correct way. And again, the intercultural dimension, questioning standards, questioning facts that are set. They are not set. English is changing all the time. Cultures are changing, identities are changing, and the way you own English in your own community, in the local communities, are also discussed. And the ninth grade, again, intelligible way. So it really depends on the teacher's autonomy and how the teacher is going to use that in the classroom. So if the teacher understands that English is a lingua franca, focus on intelligibility and what intelligibility means for an ELF-aware teacher, they're not going to correct students like to follow native norms, or to be like a native, speak like an American, speak like a British. That doesn't matter. It's not only a matter of accent anymore. And also to understand the history and how English has been evolving to be a lingua franca. What are the processes in the intercultural dimensions that have been changing English that now we can call it Englishes? So here, I tried to give some ideas on in sixth grade. This is something I got from the sixth grade competence of the BNCC. And this is the linguistic knowledge part, which is all related to the vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar, which is considered to be the most difficult parts of being ELF-aware, because we tend to follow the rules in a book that usually, or it's changing a lot, but which is we are used to take from the book, which is books are changing because of ELF. There are a lot of change coming in the pronunciation. For example, Mark Hancock is writing books now, pronunciation books that takes into consideration ELF. So everything is changing step by step, and now it's time to change our classrooms. So, but we shouldn't be only following one variety and one norm, one thing, since English is being owned by everybody. Okay, so going back to the activity. So the three competences are to recognize the differences and the likeness of the pronunciation of words in English and in Portuguese. In the case, it's the case here. The mother tongue is Portuguese, and even other languages that students know. So to see, to kind of match what is similar in different languages. Describe relations using the possessive case, and to use in an intelligible way the possessive adjectives. So here I have some ideas what I would do if I had to tackle it. So I would use models from other students from around the world, use YouTube, search for something. It doesn't need to be other students, but we'll try to find YouTube videos that shows ELF users, other ELF users, rather than native speakers. That's a small change. You're not just gonna show American or British, but you can look it up for Turkish people speaking English or using that specific grammar point that you want to use in the explain in the classroom. The use of L1 in class to scaffold learning rather than avoid it. That's very important because the first language is part of the student's repertoire. We can't ignore it. So we shouldn't have only English class, like only English spoken here class, because that's denying that there's another language in the game. There's another language there that we should consider. It's not like only using the first language, but we have technology. There is a first language there. Use other models of pronunciation other than native speakers, but not from a variety viewpoint, but as a legitimized form of English. So not point like this is a different variety from Africa that not really anybody use it. That shouldn't be something we should be like. We shouldn't be saying that because it's legitimized. People speak like that, and they are gonna encounter people speaking like that in the real world because we live in a global world, in a global community. So we keep finding people speaking different languages all the time. And here I posted this video on BrELT and actually mentioned that I would use it in different ways. So this is an example of a different model of English that I would use to discuss the history of English language in the world, introduce different cultures comparing to a local one, because this video shows a little bit of Trinidad's carnival. So it's a way to compare with your own local culture. Discuss different varieties of English. If you want to discuss varieties, expose your students to a variety of English. Take one of the songs singing that is being sung in the video and work with your students, exposing them to a new variety. And engage with people from different parts of the world to discuss the same video, which is not as difficult as it was like 5 years ago. It's very easy to engage with people from around the world using the internet. So I'm just gonna play really quick, just a little small piece of this video so you can see what it, if you really want to watch it all, watch the whole video, it's on BrELT. I posted it yesterday, okay? Did it play?
Yeah, but unfortunately we can't hear the sound.
No problem. So anyone who wants to watch it, it's on BrELT. You can just look it up. So it's talking, I just stopped here because it's talking about soca, which is a kind of music in Trinidad's carnival. So you can use this video, or you can look it up for soca music or about Trinidad's carnival. So there's a lot to talk about here. So you don't need to only engage with native speakers English. You can engage with many kinds of Englishes everywhere. So here's the conclusion I made. I just want to say that all of this that I've talked to you is the product of my studies here during this year. I am not a specialist, but yet I want to be one day. but I just started studying it. And this are some of the conclusions I've made so far in my studies here in Southampton. So ELF research in Brazil is invested in ELF in the classroom. So researchers of ELF in Brazil, like Thelma Jimenez, who is speaking in the BrELT ELF Week, and other researchers, they are invested in the classroom. They want to understand how teachers can be ELF aware, and developing awareness in teachers and training teachers on what ELF is and the implications for the classroom. The relationship Brazilians are devoted to building between ELF and, I'm sorry, it's missing here, but critical pedagogy can be explained by how Brazilian teachers are influenced by critical pedagogy of Paulo Freire, because Paulo Freire speaks to our hearts as teachers in Brazil. So, who believed that access to education was key to the liberation from a cycle of social injustices. In my studies, in reading a lot, I've read in one of Penny Cook's, which is a researcher in critical applied linguistics, that for Brazilians in underprivileged Brazilians or students of English in public schools in Brazil, they can't really relate to English because English is seen as something that they cannot achieve, which is so far from them that they can't really get to it. So we can use English to break this cycle of social injustice as well. So ELF research has changed the status of English by critically assessing the role of the language in local and global contexts, being the local aspect of English language teaching of great importance in the empowerment of English teachers first, as well as of English speakers in Brazil. So these links between critical pedagogy and ELF show how relevant English as a lingua franca is for our context. Jenkins yesterday, she actually finished her talk saying that, giving us a quote from a Brazilian saying that English as a lingua franca can empower users of English, speakers of English, learners of English. So taking this view of English being a natural phenomenon, natural language that can be used locally and globally with anyone in any part of the world, is a way to empower users of English rather than expect them to follow rules that are not possible. They're not achievable. To expect students to be like native speakers or see them as failed native speakers. That's not possible. So here are my references. If you are interested in reading anything that I posted, that I used in my slides. The slides, I'm gonna have it somewhere to share with you. So if you want to engage with it, because that's my objective in studying here. I want to help teachers somehow to make English as a lingua franca closer to teachers in Brazil, so they can engage with it and understand it and see that it's not as it is a problem that we have to solve for the classroom, but it's also something that can help us empower ourselves and create our own autonomy to grow professionally. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Priscilla. This was really enlightening. This was really great. Now it's time to see if we have questions.
Any questions?
Someone commented on YouTube while you were talking that when you mentioned intelligibility, the term used to be correct. So that was something that changed. So a good change in the document.
Yeah, it was changed, and it was good because intelligible can be used. Uh, Correct implies that only one thing is correct.
Hmm.
Intelligible, it really depends on each person, and actually it depends on the interaction. So uh, it was good. It was a good change. I'm
Yeah,
glad it happened.
yeah. So people are commenting, fantastic talk, really good. And I have a question. What teachers who have reservation, something that you saw in your research, right? When you gather data.
Can you repeat, Thiago?
Yeah,
Can you repeat your
yeah,
question,
you're
please?
breaking up a bit.
I'm sorry. What would you say to teachers who have reservations when it comes to ELF?
Um, well, everything that is new, um, we are afraid of everything that is new and different. And well, the reservations are natural, but the only way to kind of not be afraid of it is to get to know it. You have to be engaged with it and read a little bit. Or this elf week is meant for that, to introduce an idea that we've seen on BrELT already, that many people misunderstand what elf is, which is like everything goes, we shouldn't follow any rules, and we can build our own rules, and then we are going to be mutually unintelligible. That they're all myths. They are not. They are misunderstandings of what elf is. So that's what we want to do here with this week, to bridge the gap between academia and practice.
Great, great. And Andrea, could you bring the questions from YouTube?
Yeah, I'm trying to, just a second. I'm looking here. Just a minute. Right now.
And while Andrea gets the questions from YouTube, Priscilla, could you tell us a little bit about the resistance in regards to ELF in
Yeah,
academia?
I'm following here.
Because, okay. So do you feel there is resistance
Can
in
you
the
repeat,
academia
Thiago,
itself?
please?
Yeah, sorry. For some reason, I might be breaking down a little bit. Do you feel there is a resistance in the academia when it comes to ELF?
In academia, resistance in is actually hello.
I can hear you. I can hear you fine.
Okay, I'm
I
back.
think Tiago is having a
The
problem.
resistance is
I can hear
actually
you fine.
from.
Yeah. Mhm. Go ahead.
Okay, I think the resistance comes more from the ELT or SLA, second language acquisition researchers, and ELT researchers, because ELF can be quite controversial sometimes, in relation to the research that Jennifer Jenkins does, for example, because they see as unpractical. That's what I've read in some articles, or that it shouldn't be called ELF because, well, if it's natural, we shouldn't be calling it by a name. But there are a lot of researchers in ELF engaging with the pedagogy part of it and how to create ELF awareness, because that's what we can do with ELF in the classroom. It's the ELF awareness for teachers or ELF awareness for students, ELF friendly classes, or intercultural communication competence, how pragmatic strategies. These are the things we can kind of teach, but we can't teach ELF. ELF is not teachable. It's not something to be taught. So yeah, I think the resistance is more for the very traditional research areas, such as second language acquisition, for example.
Okay. Can you hear me, Priscilla?
Any other questions?
Yes.
Yeah, we have some.
Yeah, there's a question here from Ana Carolina. What do you think of the pronunciation in BNCC? There are only 2 direct mentions as habilidades, and one is related to ED endings, and there is no direct mention in 8th and 9th grades.
Yeah, pronunciation, yeah. The pronunciation part of BNCC is something that I'm still trying to understand better, because I'm studying it and trying to make sense of it for my dissertation. And I'm also trying to study more of pronunciation in ELF, which is something that I didn't really focus during my master's. I focused more in teaching.
Mm.
So I'm reading more research on how to teach pronunciation. So that's something that I really I don't know yet how to tackle it and how to answer this question. But yeah, this is very, I don't know how I would teach ED in an alpha-aware way. I have to, as I said in my talk, it's something you have to sit down, do some research, understand the needs of your students, localize the teaching, see what is intelligibility for your students, what is intelligible to them, what is intelligible coming from them. So it's very localized. There's no like ready-made solution for this kind of situations, I think.
Okay. There's a few more questions from Ana Carolina as well. She asked if have you ever had teachers comment that working with different varieties is difficult? And I think she means different varieties, probably of Englishes. I think that's what she meant.
Yeah. I had an experience as a teacher training teacher trainer before I came here, and I was trying to encourage teachers to kind of stop with the only American British exposure to different accents, so they could expose their students to other accents, because it was unanimous. It was only American British. So I was called help teachers understand the rules of English, how English can be more than American British. And they say it's difficult to find, but it's because they are not themselves
Hello? I think we
Yeah,
are
because they
having...
keep looking at the
Yeah.
Yeah, now she's back.
look at only one direction. So you have to expand your world. That's why it's you have
Yeah,
to expand, and see, look for different varieties, because it's not it's very difficult to say you're not exposed to that, because it's the natural thing you see. For example, there was a video running around the world of the president of France speaking English. It's an exposure to a different English, so you can use it in class. So it's just opening your mind to different Englishes more than anything else.
Okay, thanks, Priscilla.
Okay, so any other questions?
I think.
Any more questions?
I think that's pretty much it. We had some comments here. People are really happy, right, Tiago? Ana Carolina says she's really happy to know you're studying this, and hopefully you'll be able to shed some light on this for us soon. That she agrees with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I hope I can help.
Yeah. Right.
For sure.
Yeah. Thank you for
Priscilla's
all the
very
support.
modest.
I have had a lot of support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Priscilla, thank you very much, everyone, and we'll be back later this evening with Natalia Guerreiro. And as you know, Natalia works with aviation English, so she's going to talk about that. Her talk is entitled "Skies Without Borders." Sorry, is aviation English an ALF context? So Natalia is going to talk about that at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
So we hope to see you soon in a couple hours.
Yes.
Actually, 1 hour.
Yes, in an hour.
Okay.
So thank you everyone for coming.
Thanks
See you
everyone.
later.
Thanks Priscilla. Bye bye. Thanks Thiago.
Bye.